Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the League of Women Voters online discussion. I'm Betsy DeWitt, president of the nonpartisan Brookline League, whose mission is educating voters. And today we are pleased to welcome the Rotary Club of Brookline as our co-sponsor. A quick reminder, please join us online next Wednesday evening, October 26th at 7 p.m. to hear Professor Peter Firth speaking on Brookline bicycling for everyone. We hope to have you all join us online. Today, we will hear about the ballot questions to be voted on November 8th. Early voting has started today. First, we will hear about Brookline ballot question number 5, a proposed Proposition 2.5 override for fire station renovations that will be voted by town meeting in November. It's not listed in the Secretary of the Commonwealth's ballot question booklet. Looks like this, that you should all have received, and it does not appear on the absentee ballot, which looks like this, but the question is, it does appear on the absentee ballot, and it is at the bottom of the second page with no explanation. So we will have speakers tell us all about it, and we hope that this will help educate people as to what question 5 actually consists of. Following that, we will discuss questions 1 and 4. They will be presented by our state representative, Tommy Vitolo, and they will be followed by questions 2 and 3, presented by Brookline League Legislative Liaison, Carol Siebert. Question 5 speakers include Select Board Chair Heather Hamilton, who will outline the reasons why we have ballot question 5, followed by Fire Chief John Sullivan, who will explain the planned fire station renovations, and then Deputy Town Administrator Melissa Goff, who will explain the tax calculations based on the Proposition 2.5 override. And just for the record, this information we hope will become available online on the town's website because it's very valuable for people going forward. And now I would like to welcome our Select Board Chair, Heather Hamilton, who will begin our discussion of ballot question number 5. And for the record, this program is being recorded and will become available in the future as a video on our local access television, BIG. Welcome, Heather. You have the floor.
And the town has done a very good job at all of our debt exclusions. We've had a number of school debt exclusions. So our staff, our building staff, are very attuned to those types of changes and costs and escalation, and we know how to account for it at the outset much better. And then the other thing that I will bring up that I've heard over and over, people are very frustrated with the language used on the ballot question. That is really dictated by the state. Believe me, we would have been a lot more explicit if we had control over what language got put on the ballot.
Right. And I just want to be clear. What I was trying to say is the override is an absolute number. How it gets allocated for the work that will be eventually contracted could vary over time. Anyway, and I just want to add one more little footnote from the League, and that is that in addition to this program being recorded, our communications director is taking notes and will be doing a write-up, and she has promised to touch base with our speakers to make sure that she has recorded information accurately. So moving along, Chief Sullivan, please join us with a detailed description of all the work that needs to be done and what you hope to accomplish.
Thank you, Betsy, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Rotary for sponsoring this information session today. When I first came in 2018, one of the first things that was obvious to me was that the stations were in dire need of updating. we proposed in early 2019 to the administration that we would like to look at a capital improvement plan for all of our fire stations. At that time, based on the need to, as Chair Hamilton had pointed out, to address the toxins and the living situation for our firefighters in terms of their health. It is widely known in the fire service, broader fire service, that the rate of cancers and other health risks for our firefighters increases over time as we're exposed to different chemicals and toxins and our carcinogens as a result of our work. A good deal of that comes from the place that we live, and that's the fire stations. We have the diesel trucks that are in there, although we have the diesel capture systems. There's still a good deal of contamination from the trucks themselves. We live adjacent and within the garage is basically where our living situation is. And in two of our stations, our kitchens are right off of the apparatus floor. So it's directly connected to where we eat and have our meals. That was the original intention of this project. And that was in 2019, we looked to address that and the new OSHA standards for the state and bring our stations up to code for OSHA. So that was the original intent of our renovations project. Shortly at that time, I put together a team from consisting of both the union and the town, as well as fire administration and the buildings department, to plot a plan forward. At that time, we were moving forward. Our female firefighters stepped forward and said, "Hey, if we're doing this, you really need to address the fact that our situation as far as the accommodations for female firefighters is pretty much zero. There really wasn't much in the way of accommodations for female firefighters." And as I go through this slide deck, you'll see, and I'll go through very quickly. Those are the 5 fire stations and their locations. They're set up throughout the town in order to meet the response needs and response times dictated by standards from which we use our deployment strategies. This is actually a couple of years old now, and right now the average age of our fire stations is 95.5 years old. It's not. We've gotten great utilization out of these stations. The cost average over time for a 95-year-old station, it's paid us back in the greatest of ways. We have 2 that are on the historical register. Station 1 down at the village, that iconic tower with the clock tower, and then Station 7 up on Washington Street near Washington Square, which is our oldest station. And then you can see the rest of the stations there. And I sarcastically, so to speak, put the baby of the stations is Station 5 at 55 years old. It's not too much younger than me, so it's got some wear and tear on it, like I do. Why do we need this? I just talked about these things, and I won't belabor the point. And you know, our health of our firefighters, male, female, is at the top of the list of what we're trying to do here. It is an alarming statistic that now, as we move into the 21st century, cancer has outpaced heart and lung damage as the #1 killer of firefighters. The silent killers, the things that we cannot see, is what happens to be the #1 rate of firefighter deaths, especially post-retirement. We've had female firefighters for over 30 years, and realistically, almost nothing has been done in terms of our stations and our living accommodations to make those that situation for them equitable. in terms of facilities. And I was thoroughly convinced right off the bat by the advocacy of our female firefighters that this was something that we had to take up. As we increased the number of female firefighters, we needed to do this. It should have been done decades ago, and it wasn't. And this is the opportunity for us to do that and make things right. These are the kinds of things that if you go into the basement of our station, you can see the codes are definitely, we're not up to snuff when it comes to code and code compliance for a lot of electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and so forth. And, you know, that was another thing in 2019. The OSHA standards for the state changed, and we are subject to a much more stringent OSHA standard now than it was previously. And at any time, they could come in and mandate that we change this. If we are in the process of renovations and changing all of these things for the better to make them compliant, it is far more favorable for us as a town in terms of any sanctions or fines that might be put onto us as a result of their oversight. So one of the things that is the first objective is to take the stations and decontaminate the stations. So as Chair Hamilton pointed out, a number of our neighboring communities, literally almost all of them, have taken this on. Boston, Cambridge, Newton, Needham, Somerville, Dedham, all of the fire departments in the greater Boston area and truly across the country are taking on the same issues as we are. And we are a little behind the 8 ball on this, but we're doing it. We're moving forward. We're here before the voters to ask for their assistance to keep our firefighters safe and healthy. So one of the objectives is this thorough cleaning of the stations that we have, power washing everything down, scrubbing of all the hard surfaces, and getting rid of all soft furnishings. So you won't have nearly as many soft furnishings. So with and be replaced with non-porous furniture so that it can be decontaminated easily. But in the process of doing that, we need to make sure that it doesn't continue to happen. And so that's why we need to establish environmental zoning. And that was what the beginning stage of this were all about, the decontamination and then establishing environmental zoning. And that's done through HVAC controls, basically separating the living spaces from the contaminated spaces so that you have a hot zone, a warm zone, a kind of a transition zone, and then the living spaces, which would be contamination free to a certain degree. We can't guarantee 100%, but we will certainly limit it to a very, very small possibility of getting there. And they do that, as I said, through HVAC controls. Without getting too technical, it's basically putting up barriers and also changing the pressures, low pressure to high pressure to low pressure, so that the contaminants don't move throughout the station into those living spaces. Alter and renovate internal configurations of the stations in order to be able to accommodate female firefighters, more capacity and resiliency for them, especially in the areas of bathroom facilities, changing facilities, locker facilities, and sleeping facilities. Just a few pictures here of some of the stuff that our firefighters are, I won't say subject to, I'll just say these are the living conditions that we have. They're not ideal. Some of the tables and chairs that we have predate me on this planet. They're kind of begged, borrowed, and stealed from school department and other places. There's literally nothing new about what our folks are forced to kind of live with. I don't think any of us would have our washing machine dumping into a sink next to the washing machine as a long-term solution to how we do laundry in our homes. The showers are circa 1970s. They have not been updated. You can't clean them anymore. They're at their useful end as far as that goes. You know, water fountains that just no one would want to drink out of these things. You know, that's a condition of the floors around the stations, and it's not that the firefighters haven't been keeping it up. It's just it's no longer a situation that can be kept up with. When COVID came, we replaced all of the mattresses. So the mattresses that you see here in these living conditions are, well, that's one of the couches, but those mattresses have been replaced in order to meet the needs of COVID. And we now have mattresses that are washable and they have a plastic, if you will, cover on them so that they can be decontaminated easily. Again, just some of the wiring, and you know, that's a speaker that I think my mother would have listened to back in the 1930s when she was in school. Obviously, these things are not ideal. So originally, our timeline was hopefully to get into the fall of 2021. There was a debt exclusion at that time, and that's an important point. I know the word 2.5 override has been used a couple of times, but this is not a 2.5 override. This is a debt exclusion, meaning that once this is paid, it comes off the taxpayer's burden at that time, and it does not go on in perpetuity. So these are preliminary numbers from before, but this still basically holds true. What we anticipate to do in year 1 is to do Station 4 first up at Boylston Reservoir. That's going to be kind of a pivotal station for us. It's probably the easiest renovation that we have to do. It'll get our feet underneath us. It'll get us an idea of what we're facing in terms of the decontamination process. But it also provides us a place to use as a pivot point to move apparatus around while the rest of these station renovations go on. We will move down to the Brookline Village Station after that, approximately year 1 to year 2. Year 2 to 3 is the replacement of Station 5 on Babcock Street, and I can talk about why we need to do that in just a moment. We're actually going to switch Station 6 and Station 7. And we're going to do Station 6 first, and we're going to look at Station 7 last. So here's Station 4. This is our, as I said, the pivot point, centrally located, and the renovations are going to be built out to accommodate 2 companies which it had in the past, both a ladder and an engine. Here you can see just an example of environmental zoning. We're taking these red areas which previously were contaminated, and we're switching them to green. And you can see there's a transition zone, this gray area, which is current. This is the current condition. This is afterwards, and so we're really trying to make it such that our firefighters have a healthy place to live. So another example of other examples, and there's we have on the website the design. The entire design. Just one thing I wanted to point out as I've got this up. So all of our facilities right now fairly well have, we've adjusted over time to provide both male and female bathrooms, but they really don't, it's really an inequitable situation. The male bathrooms, which was what these fire stations were built for 100 years ago, we basically had to take small areas that were previously used for other intentions and make a female bathroom out of it, and it just does not have the same amenities as the male bathrooms do. This design, which is being universally moved to by all fire departments, includes these what they call pods. So the bathrooms will be divided up such that each pod will have a changing area, a toilet, a shower, and a sink, so that they will be gender neutral. And we'll have gender neutral bathrooms for everyone everybody will have the same equitable access, and they will be private. One of the things I wanted to explain to everybody just quickly is that originally this concept was to renovate all 5 stations. There was not a rebuild that was contemplated at the beginning. Once we moved into the situation where we needed to do major renovations to the bathrooms as well as the kitchen areas and the HVAC, our consultants came back and said, listen, Station 5, you're not going to get out of it what you think you're going to get out of it by doing renovations. It is, although the youngest station, it is not set up to be renovated the way that you're going to try to do it. You're going to spend $7 million+ trying to renovate a station that you're not going to get the result that you want. You are better off in the long run taking that station right down to the ground and rebuilding a new one and getting it to the point where you now have another 100-year station that meets all the needs that you require. Recently, Newton rebuilt 2 stations, Needham rebuilt 2 stations, Boston's in the process of, I think, their 3rd new rebuild. This is going on everywhere. Everybody's finding the same thing. When they look at renovating some of these stations, it's just not economically feasible to do it. And you're better off going straight down to ground zero and starting again. One of the advantages that does for us is that we can meet the mandates of the town meeting and the town for fossil fuel free, as well as trying to get net zero capability as close as possible for all of these stations. All of this work that you see here will include fossil-free fuel changes to our heating and HVAC systems. So every station at the end of this project will be fossil fuel free. They'll be all electric, and certainly Station 5 as a new building will meet the highest standards of green of a green building that can be achieved in a fire station. So this was the original pricing. This included the first part of this. The first stage was almost $50 million, as you see here, 49.9, to do all of the original work with fossil fuel free. We asked the consultant then, what would it cost, just in terms of giving us a number, what would it cost to make all of the stations? And you can see this NA is Station 5 because it's going to be net zero ready in the build. What would it cost to get and meet the mandate of a net zero readiness for our stations, in addition to the renovations that we're doing? And this is the prices that they came up for each of those stations, which essentially amounts to another $10 million. And in the end, it was 59.8 if we added net zero readiness. That was in January of 2022. We all understand what has happened in the long run, and the economic situation that we're in right now, supply chains, escalating inflationary costs, and to be prepared for this ballot question, we asked our consultant to go back and add an additional escalation to the price, so that when we brought the final number before the voters, it would be as close to a realistic number that we could have for the final application. And that's what they did. They came back and they raised the escalation from a 5% escalation cost standard cost, and they added 2 more percent to that, so that we could have a number that would reflect what the current economic situation is. That added another 4.6, and as well as another $250,000 for relocation costs for Station 5 in the long run. And so that's where we're coming to the voters now for $65 million debt exclusion ask for these renovations. That's how we arrived at the 65 million. And I will just address very, very quickly what Chair Hamilton had talked about as some numbers that were being thrown out as a result, and there were 82 million and 85 million. During this entire process, ancillary to these discussions about the renovations, I was engaged by the Zero Emissions Advisory Board with regard to EV, electric vehicles, moving towards the future. That was around January of this year when we were doing the budget, you know, we are in the process of looking at the impact of electric vehicles as far as the apparatus goes. I don't think there's a huge lift in terms of the staff vehicles going forward, moving towards electric. I think we can do that in short order. And we've committed to do that and work in cooperation with the town and in a town-wide plan to electrify the fleet, if you will, especially those non-emergency vehicles. Right now, we are not in a position to be able to give a realistic estimate of what it would cost for the infrastructure that would be necessary to move towards electric vehicles for fire apparatus, the actual apparatus. The apparatus, electric apparatus, are in the early stages of development and usage. There's very few communities across the country that are experimenting with electric vehicles, and they're only doing it one at a time to see what the impact is going to be on their budgets. We are not in a position to be able to support that right now. We're absolutely committed to looking at what that would cost and then moving towards that as the technology evolves. I can tell you that the city of Providence looked into it recently and put out a report that in order to get just 3 of their engines, and they have approximately 12 engines and we have 5, just to get 3 would require 5 new substations to be built in the city of Providence to support the electric needs that would go along with that. That's just something that is not in this project. It's not in the scale of this project. We were given an estimate, and it was really a preliminary, just off the cuff estimate, and that's kind of where that number came from. About 3 times the cost of the vehicle. The vehicles now, if we buy a regular a conventional fire truck, is about $750,000 average for a conventional diesel fire truck. Right now, electric fire trucks are running in the area of about 1.25 million, and the cost for the infrastructure to support that, at least preliminarily, is estimated between 3 and 5 million for each station. That's why I did not engage in putting that as part of this debt exclusion. It's something that should be part of a long-term plan for the town that can then utilize federal and state funding and as a complete town plan for electric vehicles. So that's that.
Thank you, Chief. That was very thorough, very complete, and very, very informative. Now we have some time for questions. Then I see Zoom user without a name. I know who you are.
Okay.
Please identify yourself.
Oh, I'm Peggy McGuire. Hopefully I'll become a new member soon.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Resident of Brookline for 21 years. This was an unbelievable presentation by the chief, and shocking, honestly, about the conditions. So I thought it was an excellent first step out in the community. I don't know how, how he's getting out into the community and making residents aware of this. Just a thought, pictures are worth 1,000 words, and perhaps, since it sounds like the average age of these facilities is 95.5 years old, perhaps a tour of the facilities by residents would be most helpful. Probably starting at the first station or however you want to do it. That would be my recommendation. And the other thing, a couple of things came to mind here. Down the line a bit would be the cost of replacement of the equipment, the fire trucks. And I'm not sure where the town is with respect to end of life of some of these vehicles, but also wondering where you did not mention EVs. Excuse me, I'm getting over pneumonia. So, wondering if there's been any consideration for EVs. As
I don't want to stop you, but he did explain that they're very costly and the
The EV
installation would be prohibitive.
well, he did say electric, okay, and diesel, but I didn't hear him say, I meant hybrids. That's what I meant, the hybrids.
Oh.
Yeah, my apologies, hybrids as an alternative to, when we need to replace fire trucks in the future. But, I would really appreciate a opportunity for residents to tour the facilities and see for themselves the aging conditions of the facilities.
Thank you
And
very much. I think we need to give the next person a turn.
Yep. So thank you for the presentation, Chief.
Okay, Joyce Graff, you must unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm a homeowner in Brookline. I have owned 4 different properties in Brookline of ages very similar to the firehouses. And I am shocked that they have been allowed to stay at this level, which the fire department would not permit me to do. That the fire stations won't pass fire inspection for those electrical panels and things like that, I find shocking. So why are we not doing maintenance on a more routine level? And are we planning to do better routine maintenance going forward to keep our properties up to date and safe for the people who live there? I know you keep the equipment up to date, but I am shocked that they have been allowed to get to this point. And
Thank
I'm
you,
also
Ms. Graham.
worried about impact on the taxpayer because my tax bill is already doubled in the last 5 years. And it's, we can't keep going to the homeowners to ask them to pay more and more and more.
Thank you, Ms. Graff. Chief, would you like to give a response to that?
Sure. The maintenance of our facilities has been an ongoing issue for a long time now. We do the day-to-day upkeep, but the maintenance is done through the buildings department. And I'm not going to, place the blame on the buildings department in any way. These are old facilities that have not had a serious update in terms of their electrical and plumbing and so on in 50 years. And it's just, I can't say why the advocacy hadn't been stronger prior to my arrival, but I can tell you it was one of the first things that I took on. And I assure you that the maintenance moving forward after these facilities are completed will be vigorous and keep moving. I just want to quickly address the tours and the pictures. We're happy to do tours and pictures, but I will, also just remind everyone here that as a public official, I cannot advocate for or vote for or for money. I can just tell you the conditions and show you the conditions. So I walk a fine line when it comes to what I'm able to do. We have members from our union here. Patty Kripe is here, the vice president of the union, as well as other members of the union. They're kind of taking up the advocacy role on our behalf. And they and I can coordinate with anyone that wants to take a walk through any of our stations and see what those conditions are. I think you would be shocked if you saw what our firefighters are living in right now.
I'll just, if I may, Betsy,
Please.
I just want to address, maintenance of our capital assets, buildings in particular, is we just don't have enough money. I mean, Joyce kind of summed it up in the two columns that she made. Outrage about what we're not doing, but a concern about her taxes going up, and I mean that's the rub. Nobody wants to pay more for doing what we need to do. The outstanding laundry list of what we should be doing would raise taxes astronomically. So we have strategic plans and we make hard choices. And one of the things that the BFAC report did was to say, when you do a debt exclusion, you have to account for that operating cost going forward in an operational override. So we have started to look more into that.
Correct. Very messy, complicated financing issues to be addressed. We have another question. Ms. Robinson, would you like to unmute yourself?
First, I'd like to say thank you to my fellow league members for giving this discussion and those that are in support of helping with that. I'd like to thank the fire chief for being here with us today. My concern has been what accommodations have there currently been for the women through this time, since the fire stations weren't designed to help them have their own separate space. And I do understand the fact that the budget has not allowed for many changes through these years. And I know that the new budget accommodates everyone that needs accommodation, but I'm concerned about what women have had to go through. I'm also on the Brookline Commission for Women. So that is the reason for my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. And I can address some of it. I might ask Patty to jump in here because she's had to live it. Basically we took some small bathrooms that were previously designated for either public or officer use and designated them as female facilities in order to meet the short term, if you will, necessity to have bathroom facilities. One of the things that's kind of ironic is that in one station down at Station 1 at the Village, we built an entire suite, if you will, out of a underused area for a bedroom area and a bathroom area for female firefighters. It was completely substandard to what the men were using because we had to kind of make it out of a space that really wasn't designed for that in the first place. There was no window. There was, the ventilation was terrible. It was out of the way. It wasn't close to where you would need to be to slide down the pole, so to speak, to get to where you needed to be. It was just a knee-jerk reaction because, oh my goodness, we have females now. What it actually turned out to be in the long run was discriminatory because you're now separating and segregating the females in an area that is inadequate. And so we've since stopped using that area for the bedroom area, and that was just one of the areas that was difficult. When I had a conversation with Patty, she basically said none of the females want to go to Station 5.
Shall we ask Patty to comment?
Yep. Set up Patty if you want for Station 5, or you can address whatever you want.
Welcome.
So up until Chief Sullivan came here, I was at Station 7, the oldest one. I had to use the public bathroom. I had to sleep separately. I moved into Station 1 where I became ill for 2 years. I was never well during the winter. I was in the emergency room because of constant, the condo that we call it, the chief mentioned, was above a staircase to the mechanics room, so it created a chimney effect. So I breathed in the products of combustion during the day, The heat, the HVAC system didn't work, so I froze in the winter, you know, and sweltered in the summer. I chose not to have children. I come from a family with scientists. I was not comfortable having kids, knowing that I could not breastfeed. I mean, the studies now show that we can't and we shouldn't. And this is a long time coming. We have a medic who's fighting for her life. She has cancer, 3 organs are affected. This is a long time coming. We're doing the best we can. And it's been tough, and we're doing the best we can with what we have, but we don't have enough.
Well,
And
thank you
that's
very
pretty
much.
much
We
what I can say
appreciate
about it.
your comments and participation and candid willingness to speak candidly. I think we're going to take one more question because we do have a few more things and we need to move on. But I will say, and I just want to go on record right now that this is an extraordinarily useful and helpful way of having people understand why do we have this ballot question, which has been something we keep hearing because people were completely befuddled about what ballot question 3 was all about. Well, all right, now, I mean, sorry, ballot question 5, what was it all about? So I think we're now getting a pretty clear answer. Anyway, now we have a question for Mr. Herbert. You need to unmute yourself.
Thanks very much. The name is Hebert, by the way. It's commonly
Hebert, sorry, I'm reading from the bottom.
commonly misconstrued. So my question is of the chief. First of all, I think this is a really good forum and a really good presentation. There seems to be no question, in my mind anyway, that these changes need to be made. So that to me seems a foregone conclusion. The question that I have is about the electric vehicle aspect relative to the net zero. So in the presentation, there was an additional amount of money dedicated to the net zero aspect, several $1 million, as I recall. And I appreciate the fact that it would be extremely difficult to electrify very large fire vehicles. And one even wonders if you should have electric fire vehicles, given some of the pictures and information that we see coming out of Florida, where salt water that has affected electric vehicles has caused them to catch on fire, even sometimes a couple of weeks or 3 weeks after they were exposed to just salt. So I can fully understand and appreciate not wanting to have additional substations to be able to support large vehicles. But I think that I heard in the presentation that there was no provision made for electric vehicle charging, even for the smaller vehicles that the fire stations have. So that's number one, is a question about.
Mr. Hibbert, we're going to have to ask you to conclude because we still have more ballot questions to discuss.
Okay.
I have at least one other question. So can we just put this one to the chief?
Yes. Okay. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So the answer, thank you, Mr. Hebert. The answer to that is that we are investigating electric and hybrid. To Ms. McGuire's questions, we already have some hybrid vehicles. They're not the hybrids of today, but the kind of the old style, if you will, hybrids. They don't plug in, but they shut off when you and they use the batteries for kind of in-city driving. But the ability to charge just basic fire cars, the support vehicles, is not an issue, and that won't be a problem moving forward. We're already committed to looking at our Fire Prevention Bureau vehicles and our non-emergency response vehicles for electrification, whether that's hybrid or EV, full EV, we're there. The problem that we have with our fire prevention vehicles is they all sit out here on the street in 350 Washington. There's no facility for them to be able to be electrified, if you will, to stay in-house. And so that's why I say it's part of a bigger picture, a town-wide electrification process of the fleet. And we're right on board with that when it comes to that. So that's the answer to that question.
And I'm sorry if I missed your answer, but did you not also mention that if you get to electric vehicles, you will also require, as I understand it, some unusual, how should I put it, some specialized charging facilities in order to run them?
For the apparatus, yes. You have to do a DC charger, which is a 440 amp or greater, which would require additional substations, which would also require changes to the generators in all of our stations, potentially, adding a second generator, which would be a diesel generator,
Right.
to be able to keep up with that. Just to be clear, the fire trucks that are out there right now, electric fire trucks, also have a diesel generator on them. So if they get powered down to the point where they can't meet the demand, the diesel generator inside the truck kicks on and creates electricity to keep the thing going. So it's not really fully electric as, a Tesla is, where there's just no combustion engine at all. So we're just not there yet.
Thank you very much, Chief. Okay, we have last question. Ms. Silverman?
Thank you, Betsy. It's not a question, it's a statement, and I'll be brief. It's a statement of appreciation. I want to thank the Brookline firefighters for the sacrifices you've made, risking not only your personal safety, but also your health due to the major contributor of contamination. Thank you.
And I should just point out that Ms. Silverman is also a member of the Brookline League Board. So that, I think, concludes our presentation on ballot question number 5, which is unique to Brookline. And I think you have had this morning an extraordinarily thorough explanation of why. I don't entirely understand what was, or I should say, I do understand, but it's complicated to understand what the circumstances are that the question appeared to be so poorly explained in the various public media that are normally assigned to ballot questions. Anyway, but it is a Brookline ballot question. It will be on the ballot when you vote. It's on your printed ballot if you vote early online, and it will be on the ballot when you vote in person. And I think, Mr. Benka, you really would like one more question?
Oh.
Unmute yourself.
I am. Thank you very much, Betsy. Just before we leave question 5, are we going to hear from Melissa Goff?
Oh, yes, I'd like to go to Melissa, but I can't until the questions stop.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Melissa, now tell us about what will happen when this passes and how will people be able to calculate the impact? Thank you.
Sure. So as was previously stated, we're doing our borrowing for this project and we're funding it through a debt exclusion. So a debt exclusion is a temporary increase to the tax levy. It will be, voters will feel the impact of this project for the life of the bonds that we're going to be borrowing. And then once the project is paid off, then the levy, that payment will go away. So wanted to give you a sense of our plans for borrowing. $65 million is not going to be felt all at once. It's something that we're going to be borrowing over time as the stations get renovated. So the impact will be gradual. We have plans here for an $18 million borrowing as the first phase that we're doing. And then as we're proceeding with the other stations, we have a schedule for additional funding rounds. We have our full impact of this project coming in at fiscal 28, which will be year 5 of our cycle. Our current assumptions for the borrowing are that we have a 5.25% interest rate assumed. We usually check with our financial advisor on the market and what is a good assumption to use for planning purposes. So at this point, this is the recommendation from our financial advisor. We're planning on borrowing for a 25-year term and under a level payment scenario. So given that, with those assumptions in hand, we've got a tax impact of about 1.74%. And that will be felt in year 5. So it will be gradual and it will build as we go through those borrowing cycles from the previous slide. This is a slide from the assessors that also demonstrates the gradual impact. So you can see year 1, it's 0.48, and then it grows to 1.74. I know people are very curious about the calculators that have been put out from other communities. And so I am excited to share with you that we do have our calculator ready to go. Very special thanks to the IT department who worked very hard with the assessors this week to make sure that it's launched. So I'm going to share my screen again and just show you how to navigate to that calculator. So if you are on the town's website, you can go to the departments and go to the assessing office. And once you're in the assessing office, if you look on the left-hand side, you've got your debt exclusion calculator. And all you need to do is put in your street number and your name, and you'll have the estimate of the impact on your property. And the fire department is also going to be putting out an FAQ sheet that will be launched sometime next week that will also provide a lot of the content that the chief has provided today as well. So both the calculator and the chief's information will be I think it'll be living on the fire department webpage, but the debt exclusion calculator is available now on the assessing website.
That is absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, Melissa and her colleagues in the IT department and the assessor's office have managed to put this together in a very short time, because I know when we first started organizing this event, she was thinking, oh, I really need to do that, or we need to do that. So I'm delighted that it has been accomplished. And I think it's very important as a complete, so to speak, complete the picture. We know what needs to be done. We know the costs that have been estimated, and we know that it's projected out over a period of time. And you can now go to the town's website and calculate based on the current knowledge, bearing in mind that there is a multi-step, how should I put it, approvals operation that's required. First, you vote the ballot question, then town meeting still has to vote to approve this as part of its process starting on November 12th, I think it is. And once the ballot question is approved and the town meeting vote has been approved, then steps can be taken to implement all of these items. So we still have a way to go. And as the chief pointed out, there's still a planning component underway, and things have not, at least in terms of the bottom line dollar amount is something we do know. The allocation of that dollar amount has yet to be finalized, but we know the chief is working on it. And I do hope that the chief will be able to organize, or in collaboration with community groups, and Lee would certainly be willing to participate, some tours so that folks can see the conditions and understand exactly why this has been triggered. It's clearly important. Therefore, we now are ready to move on to our next item, which is a discussion of ballot questions 1 and 4, which are actual statewide ballot questions. And therefore, for that purpose, we have our state representative, Tommy Vitolo, who will give us a quick, I hope, and thorough explanation. And as the moment you have the floor, you need to unmute yourself. Tommy, welcome.
I will give you a quick explanation, therefore it will not be thorough. My name is Tommy Vitolo. I am Brookline's state representative, and I will remind you that there is an election on November 8th. In the meantime, in addition to the ballot questions for some people on the ballot, but for the ballot questions, I want to quickly talk about question 1 and question 4. Question 1 is a very special question because it is a constitutional amendment. This is different than questions 2, 3, and 4, which are changes to law. The only way we can amend the Constitution in Massachusetts is by checking in with the voters, and we're doing exactly that. There have been 2 consecutive sessions where the legislature has voted yes in favor of question 1. I voted yes both of those times, and I am in favor of question 1. And question 1 simply would create a very specific graduated income tax in Massachusetts. We have a graduated income tax at the federal level. As you make more money, that additional income can be taxed at a higher rate. By the SJC's interpretation of the state constitution today, that is not permitted in Massachusetts. And so the only way to have a graduated income tax in Massachusetts is through a constitutional amendment. Question 1 does that, but in a very specific way. It doesn't say any graduated income tax is permitted. It says specifically that income in excess of $1 million in a calendar year will be taxed at 4% higher than the income tax that folks pay for less than $1 million in that year. And so the current tax rate is 5%. And if you, on the million and first dollar, you still pay 5%. If this passes, on the million and first dollar that you make this year in income, you will pay an extra 4 cents. Rather than 5 cents, you will pay 9 cents. That is the simplest sort of explanation of it. The money must be spent on education and transportation. It is expected to bring in about $1.2 billion in the first full year of its implementation. Some folks disagree about that estimate, but that's the official estimate on the Secretary of State's website. And again, it is only for income above $1 million. So if you earn $1.1 million in income in a year, it's not 9% on all 1.1 million. By the way, good for you for making $1,100,000 in a single year. It is only on the $100,000 above $1 million, right? So it's only on the income above $1 million. Question 4 is the driver's license question. And sometimes these questions, it can be hard to figure out what yes means and what no means. And so in the case of question 1, yes means you want to create this new income tax bracket and change the Constitution to do it. In question 4, yes means that yes, you believe that undocumented immigrants who pass the tests and pay the fees can get driver's licenses, and no means the law should not allow that. To be clear, state law was changed. I voted in favor to allow undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses beginning earlier this year. It actually doesn't go into effect until next year, but we passed the law earlier this year. And so this question 4 was put forward by people who are opposed to that, who are hoping that you will vote no, so that undocumented immigrants cannot get driver's licenses. I am on record as being supportive of it. I voted yes in the legislature. I will be voting yes on question 4 on election day because I believe that undocumented immigrants should have access to driver's licenses. I believe that because I'm perfectly happy with them having insurance, and I'm perfectly happy with them passing the tests so that when they do drive, they hopefully drive a little bit more safely. That's my view on it. A yes is yes, undocumented immigrants, should they pass the tests and pay the fees, have access to driver's licenses. A no is that no, they should not. Every once in a while, folks ask about voting, which I feel like is appropriate here with the League of Women Voters and I'm the vice chair of election laws. There are thousands and thousands of people in Massachusetts today who have driver's licenses legally, who are not allowed to vote. We already have a system to make sure, within reason, that they don't vote. And there has been no collected evidence that people who are in the United States legally and have a Massachusetts driver's license but are not citizens, there's no evidence that they are voting. And to be clear, we're talking about 16 and 17-year-olds. We're talking about people with visas. And we're talking about the very, very small number of people who have been convicted of a felony involving election fraud and therefore are never allowed to vote again, but still are allowed to drive as long as they have the driver's license. So that's the super quick version of questions 1 and question 4. There are significant campaigns on both. You can find websites and commercials in favor and opposed to both. And I encourage you to do your homework, but I am happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
And I'm just going to add to Representative Vitolo's comments that the Massachusetts League of Women Voters is on record in support of ballot question 4, permitting licenses to people who follow who go through the procedure, which is to say all of the steps that you have to take as a citizen to get a driver's license. The non-citizens would be required to take the same steps and be.
That's right. They too will have the honor and privilege of waiting in line at the RMV.
Right. Anyway, okay. Thank you very much, Rep. Vitolo. So are there questions for our representative? I see Ms. Mary Mendes.
Yes. Hi, Betsy. Happy to meet you. Could Mr. Vitolo comment on how that first number 1 has to do with any retirement incomes, any
Sure.
sales of property, or any estate?
Mhm.
If I get $1 million in an estate and I also have $100,000 income, how does that affect me?
It's a great question. So retirement income, when you think about Social Security or things like that, that is income. No one gets over $1 million in Social Security income, I assure you, but you could collect income in a number of different ways. And if your combined income exceeds $1 million, you would have that higher tax rate only for the income that exceeds $1 million, not for the 1 million. So let's talk about what happens if you sell a home. In the first place, not only it's not about the final sale price of the home, because if you sold a home for 1.5 million, but you paid $300,000 for the home, you only pay tax on the 1.2 million. But there's another few deductions you get. Any money you spent on capital improvements on the house, a new roof, a new boiler, you also get to deduct out. So that 1.5 went to 1.2, and now it's down to $1 million, and now you're at that $1 million threshold. Additionally, if it's your primary residence, you get an additional $500,000 to take off the top before that ticks in as well. And so it is possible that, particularly in a place like Brookline, that someone sells a house for $2 million that they paid $84,000 for many, many years ago. And even after you include the money they put into the house and the $500,000 deduction, it comes in at, say, 1.2 million. In that case, that person who just sold a house for $2 million is going to pay an extra 4% tax on something like $200,000, which is $16,000. So on that 1 year, when you have a $2 million check from the bank for the house you sold, you would pay thousands of dollars more tax, in this case, $16,000. So it's possible that you could be exposed to additional tax that 1 year. But relative to the price of the house, it's actually quite small once you factor in that it's only over $1 million and the price you paid for the house doesn't count and the capital upgrades toward the house doesn't count and that $500,000 you get to take off, right? So the answer is occasionally someone will have to pay more tax for 1 year when they sell a multi-million-dollar house.
But thank you for the explanation.
I'm sorry?
I wondered about inheritance and stuff like that.
Yeah, so my understanding is inheritance income is income. And so if you pulled in more than $1 million inheritance in 1 year, good for you. And the total income over the $1 million would be subject. Now, of course, if that estate is divided amongst multiple heirs, then it's each heir separately, right?
Right. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Tony.
All right. Is there another question? If so, please do the hand raise from the bottom of the screen. because otherwise I won't see you have a question. Okay, I see one hand up, Ms. Robinson.
Sorry, going to that inheritance, when you said each family member, are you stating that each family member would be taxed at that $1 million? Anything over $1 million?
If, if I find a new line of work and I suddenly find myself with significant amounts of money, when my spouse and I die, we would divide our estate to our 2 heirs. And so if we had $2 million, my son Felice would get $1 million, my daughter Angelina would get $1 million. And then in addition to any other income they had that year, they would ask, is our total income more than $1 million? And the income over $1 million would be taxed. If more likely, working for the government, when I and my wife die, we have, let's say, $1 million. When we divide it between the 2 kids, each kid would get $500,000. And so it's much less likely that their total income would be over $1 million. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other question for Representative Vitolo? I guess we're going back. Yes, Ms. Mendez?
Yes, I wondered how, when you're counting up to the $1 million, Social Security or other retirement funds that you might get, those Social Security add into that $1 million?
All income in that calendar year. So yes, Social Security money is income. But it's, look, Social Security doesn't pay us enough. It's probably not the thing that pushes you over $1 million.
Anyway.
No, but things. Okay, thank you.
We have 2 more ballot questions to discuss. So I think I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us, Representative Vitolo, and for explaining and doing what most people really wanted to understand, which is how will this actually affect me and my family. So we appreciate that. And now
for everything you do.
Undertake, and we may get back to more questions if we have some time. But we now have ballot questions 2 and 3. And for that, Legislative Liaison, Brookline League member Carol Siebert has the floor. Carol, would you like to explain to us questions 2 and 3?
Yes, and unlike Tommy, I don't have a position on these questions. My job here today is not an advocacy one. It's just an explanation. So the main idea is that everyone would know what they'll be confronted with if they have not already voted when you enter the ballot box, because a lot of these questions have pages of small print.
Right.
Question 2. And I won't make an attempt to go into all of the small print that you'll find if you read the entire question.
Right, and in fairness, those are explained in this.
Yes, and the other important thing to say about that red book that was sent to all of the residents in the state by the State Secretary for the Commonwealth, they have not only given you the whole question, they've given you a summary of the question, and they've told what would happen if you had a yes or no vote. But in addition to that, they have spent the time to find a lobbyist on each answer. So if it's a question about dental insurance, we'll have a lobbyist from the dental insurance company. And on the other side, you'll have a lobbying group in favor of question 2. And the same thing applies in question 3 on liquor licenses. So if you're interested in hearing pros and cons and what people think would be a good reason to vote yes or a good reason to vote no, that you cannot look to the league for, but you can find it in the Red Book. And that, of course, is up on the Secretary of the Commonwealth's website, easy to find. But question 2 is a proposed law that would direct the Commissioner of the Mass Division of Insurance to approve or disapprove the rates of dental benefit plans. At present, the Division of Insurance does not approve or disapprove of the rates. It would require that a dental insurance carrier spend at least 83% of premium dollars on the dental expenses of the members and on quality improvement, not on administrative expenses. Excess premiums that they collect would be refunded to members of the plan. For a lot of detail, I do recommend that you read thoroughly, but a yes vote here would regulate dental insurance rates, which we have not had before, including requiring companies to spend at least 83% of their premium take on patient care, member care, and on quality improvements, rather than on administrative expenses. And there are other changes that will be made with this question. A no vote would make no change relative to regulations applying to dental insurance companies. Question 3 is another proposed law. It would make changes to the laws that govern retail sale of alcoholic beverages in the state. It would increase the statewide limits on the combined number of licenses for the sale of alcoholic beverages for off-premises consumption. This is not bars, this is sale of beverages for off-premises consumption. And this would include, when they talk about the combined number, it includes both all alcohol beverage licenses as well as beer and malt beverage licenses. That's a distinction that's important to understand with this question. The change that they want to make would be that any one retailer who has control of a license would be able to have, the current number is 9, and that would be raised in 2023 to 12 licenses. The number would increase over the coming years to 15 licenses in 2027 and to 18 licenses in 2031. So the overall impact of this portion of the proposed law would be to increase the total number of combined licenses over a period of time to the upper number of 18 in 2031. Beginning in 2023, this proposed law would set a maximum number of all alcoholic beverage licenses that any one retailer could own or control at 7. So if that retailer already has 7 or more licenses for selling all alcoholic beverages, there would not be more forthcoming. 7 will be the limit. Starting in 2023, that maximum number will be 7. The proposed law will also require that these retailers conduct sales for off-premises consumption in a face-to-face transaction. In other words, you won't be able to check out, self-checkout at the grocery store or any other retail operation. And you won't be able to use automated checkout. So it'll be a face-to-face transaction. The calculation of fines that would be levied on that do not comply, and those fines are instead of having your license suspended, that would be changed in such a way that the fine would be based not on the amount of alcoholic beverages that the retailer sells, but it would be based on all of their product. So in other words, the gross profits from sales of alcoholic beverages would not be the basis. It would rather be the gross profits of sales on all of their material, everything that they sell. Out-of-state driver's licenses would now be added to the list of forms of identification that would be considered acceptable proof of either age or identity. So the way we have things now, drivers from out of state cannot purchase alcoholic beverages producing their driver's licenses. That would change so that we would be able to include out-of-state driver's licenses. So in summary, a yes vote would increase the number of total licenses that a retailer could have. It would limit the number of all alcoholic beverage licenses, what people often call a full liquor license. And it would restrict the use of automatic checkout and require retailers to have a in-person, face-to-face trans. Those retailers could accept an out-of-state driver's license as proof of age and identity. So those are the two questions. If you need more information, or if you want to hear pros and cons, which we're not offering here today, the best source is the one Betsy showed, the red booklet from the Secretary of the Commonwealth.
Thank you very much, Carol. And I'm happy now to take questions. If you would like to have a question, please use the raised hand from the bottom of the screen, because otherwise I may not see you. Because I don't have everybody's face on my screen. So we do have a question. Judy Leitner, if you would unmute yourself, you may ask your question. Judy?
Yes, hi.
Hi there.
So I appreciate the explanation. I have a couple of questions on question 3. So question 3 would mean that you can no longer take someone's liquor license away. They would only get fines.
No, I'm sorry if that's the impression I left.
Okay.
The way things work now, you could have a fine as opposed to having your license suspended. And this will change in that the way they calculate that fine will be different. The fine, if you choose to have that as opposed to having your license, the fine would be based gross profits of everything you sell, as opposed to just on the basis of your intake from alcoholic beverages sales.
Okay, so in fact, people's licenses can still be suspended.
There's no change to that portion of the current law. The only change is how the rate of a fine would be calculated. The fine is calculated differently if this law passes.
Okay, and just this seems a somewhat complicated issue with lots of different ins and outs, and I read the explanation in the Red Book. That might be better solved at the legislative level as opposed to a ballot question level. I don't know if Representative Vitolo has any thoughts about that, and if he does, if he'd like to answer that.
I don't, and I wouldn't.
Okay. And I'm just going to add, and maybe because we still have our select board chair with us, I don't know if Heather wants to say anything. There are also local licensing regulations that are enacted in addition to whatever the state says is possible. So the town can also limit the number of places where licenses can be held. I don't know, Heather, do you want to say anything about that?
I'll just say that one of the biggest surprises getting on the board is all of the regulations around licensing.
Everything.
I will offer this though. Our marijuana establishments, the number of establishments are tied to the number of alcohol licenses that we have. So you affect one, you will affect the other. I don't have a problem with that, but I just saw Susan Park turn on her camera. I know that I am.
We'll probably hear more, yes.
Yeah. You know, as Judy said, this is a rather complicated issue, but that's everything these days.
Absolutely. Well, I can certainly agree with you about that one. And I think it means that it's important to understand, I don't know how to say this, the details in the ballot questions. Going back to raised hands, Susan Park, if you are unmuted, you can speak.
Okay, see, and thank you, Heather. Right, I think if we vote yes on this ballot question, what that means is with more licenses, there could be more cannabis retail stores, because the retail stores is 20% of the liquor licenses. And right now we're at 4. I have a warrant article that's going before town meeting trying to cap no more than 4, which would then go on the ballot. But the important thing here to know is that if we vote yes on this, we're going to be increasing alcohol stores, which, you know, like, that's fine. But the thing is, it ties into not only cannabis retail stores, but also in the future consumption, cannabis consumption cafes in Brookline. So, you know, we have to be careful how we vote, because if you vote wrong, so saying, yes, let's have more retail stores. And because I'm a co-petitioner, there's 9 of us, including a high school student that's co-petitioning with us. There has been a rise of cannabis addiction in the high school. And so, you know, these are all things that we need to know. There's a lot of parents who are very upset that their kids are addicted, and the THC levels of cannabis is 7 times higher than it used to be back in the 60s. And the data and the science now says that 1 in 6 kids are getting addicted to cannabis. So unfortunately, there has been, people have come forward and said that kids who have endometriosis or medical issues, you know, they have a medical marijuana card, they go in Brookline, and unfortunately they do share it with their kids. So even though you have to be 21 to get cannabis, I mean, we all know that that doesn't always happen, that there's loopholes.
Susan, we're not talking the marijuana right now.
Okay.
But
Sorry,
for
Betsy.
the point you made,
Yeah, my point.
marijuana licenses are based on the number of alcoholic beverage licenses.
That's correct.
If
That is correct.
alcohol beverage licenses are increased, that would mean marijuana licensing can also be increased.
That's absolutely correct. Thank you,
Okay.
Betsy.
All right. I just want to put it in sort of dumb, simple terms there. Okay. Any other hands up, folks? Click on the bottom of the screen if you have one. Yes, Donna.
I just want to thank you, Carol, for excellent explanations of questions 2 and 3. You really simplified them. I'm surprised that within the actual question that sales of alcohol via online transactions were not included in the wording. So because the wording includes face-to-face transactions only, not self-checkout. So it's not a question, Carol, for you. It's just an observation that I noted.
The other term that they use is automated. They will prohibit automated and self-checkout. It's not what's meant by automated.
Yeah.
Whether it's on or not, I do not.
Okay. Thank you.
And to some extent, I don't want to, because we don't have a position at all on this, but it's important to think about the fact that part of this ballot question is addressing the discrepancy between large scale operations and what I would call your neighborhood liquor store, whatever that is. That's part of what that ballot question is talking about. And it's very helpful to do the research to understand the issues that could be affected by it. And as we were told, as Carol said, there's a lot of published materials out there. I think the Boston Globe has been taking positions on these ballot questions, and I know there have been debates and discussions ongoing. So online you can find a lot. Now, we have another question. Is it Sharon or Mr. Herman there who wants to speak? If so, unmute yourself, please. There you go. Okay.
My question is, you were talking about multiple licenses, like 7 and 23, going up to 18 and 31.
It's across the state, be aware. We're not talking Brookline, we're talking across the state.
Yes. I have, why does a particular liquor store need more than one license? Why is it limited?
I think the argument, just from what I remember from my own experience, is that it's the chain stores.
Oh, you mean like
it's the owner, it's not necessarily the brick and mortar. And I will say that there are different types of alcohol licenses. There is malt beverage, like wine and malt beverage is a separate category, all alcohol, for, spirits. So it's not as straightforward as you would think.
So in other words, a particular liquor store or chain could have multiple licenses for that operation.
Yes.
The goal, I think, of this is to change the limits that currently exist. That's what I understand the ballot question is about in part. But then as Chair Hamilton has said, it's also affected by local laws in the municipality. So the city of Boston and the town of Brookline can have local legislation that adds additional limitations. It is a messy, complicated matter, for sure.
Is
Okay.
it, I ask a question? Betsy?
Sure.
Hi, thank you so much, by the way. So I have a question. So I forgot what question it was, the question regarding the dental. Is there anything in the ballot question that talks about how, what's the word I'm trying to say, how they're going to monitor this and have it into law? Like, do we need now more departments that look at how much, audit each dental office, and how do they make sure this happens?
The actual proposed law is about 4 pages long in that red booklet, and it would be worthwhile to study those 4 pages. But what I can tell you is that there's a lot of apparatus associated with this new requirement. The summary is a very simple matter. 83% of the premium has to go for actual patient care or quality improvement. But when you read the fine print, you will see that this would really entail quite a lot of apparatus to make it work and to make it be transparent and reliable. So yes, there's a lot said about all of that in the actual proposed law.
Carol, if I'm not mistaken, is part of the purpose here to bring dental insurance under similar overall, how should I put it, oversight that the other forms of health insurance have?
When you read the pro statement included in the red book, it's written by someone from the dental business. And that person says that that is one of the goals, that this is the sort of thing that happens with health insurance, and it should also be required of dental insurers.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we have a question from Judy Leitner. Judy, you have to unmute first.
Yes, hi. Just in terms of that question, isn't there already a commissioner, an insurance commissioner who's already in place, so that
there is?
Wouldn't you just add dental insurance to their jobs? Is there some, that's what it would seem to me. I'm no expert, but it would seem that you would just add that to their what they're already currently doing for health insurance.
What the proposed law says is that it would direct the commissioner of the Massachusetts Division of Insurance to approve or disapprove the rates of dental benefit plans. That's the reference to the existing commission on insurance. But in addition to having that commissioner now determine whether rates are to be approved or disapproved, there are these other regulations that would come into play. And the main one, the most important one, is the 83% of premiums going toward patient care, member care, or quality improvement, as opposed to being used for bureaucratic or administrative expenses.
Okay, any other questions? If so, you got to put your hand from the bottom of the screen up. And I don't know, Donna, do you still have a question? Your hand's still up.
I've just lowered it. Sorry,
Okay,
Betsy.
all right. Then I think we have come to the end of our ballot question discussion. And I would like to thank all of the presenters who participated and contributed to this. We really appreciate getting more information out. I certainly think that we now have a much better understanding about question 5 and a better understanding about questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. But at least 1, 2, and 3 have been written up. 4 is a little less, I guess, publicized, and 5 was not written up by anybody anywhere at all, except you can find out about it on the town's website. So with that said, we at the League of Women Voters thank you all for being part of this and hope we will see you again. We have another special event, totally, I would say, informational, and in fact, I would argue even something that one can enjoy. Next Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. It'll also be online, and you have to ask for a link. But we're going to hear Professor Peter Firth talking about bicycling for everybody in Brookline. And there have been a number of published articles recently, I noticed, in various newspaper things that talk about bicycling. And it's very clear that bicycling has become a much more active and engaged way of transportation. And it almost feels a little bit like the pandemic has triggered some more bicycle use, but it's very clear that it's becoming a more practical way to get around, and having access and safe roadways is extremely important. Peter Firth will be telling us more all about that. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again. And at this point, we declare the meeting over. We will be able to share a video in a little while, and it will be available on the Brookline Interactive Group big website. So thank you all, and goodbye.